Okay, so now we've got our recipes loaded from the API. So the next step is to add that to the list. So we have here a table list view. What we need to do is add our information to the delegates for the table view. And the information that we need here is starting with the number of sections. That was going to be 1. We'll leave that at that. And the number of rows in section. So let's do recipes count. So this will return the number of recipes that we have in our list. The height stays the same, and then we need to configure the cell, each cell for each recipe. To configure the cell, we'll need to connect these UI elements to our recipe list cell. So what we'll do is click on that. So what we need to do is hit Control and then drag that to our file here, and then add. So this is going to be our dish image view. And then this is going to be the dish title. And then this label is going to be the tweet account. Alright, so we're good to go. So in our recipe cell, let's make a function that's actually going to set the details of the recipe. So first thing to do is add a function called set details. And then here we're going to pass in our recipe object. And each cell will have one recipe object. Okay, let's add that to our included files. Okay, so the first thing to do is to set our dish title. And then that's going to be the recipe.name. And then let's also set the tweet account. And that's going to be the Twitter share count. And then the last thing we need to also set is the image itself. Okay, the Twitter. Okay, before we do that, the Twitter share count is an integer, so we need to set that. Convert that to a string. Okay, so for the image, right now we have an image URL, so we're gonna have to load the URL from load the image from that URL. So we have a recipe dot thumbnail, I think it's called. So what we'll do is convert that to an NS data. So let's say, so that's going to be the image data. So we can do data with content of URL, and that URL needs to be passed in with our thumbnail. So that needs a URL. So what we'll do is create a URL, NS URL. And then we do URL with string. So this line is going to create a URL for us, and then this line is going to create the data, or basically request the data from that URL and push that into our data. So let's change that to URL. So now when we do have the image data, then we also need to actually create a UI image from that data. and then use the image with data function and then pass in our image data. So we are almost there. So with that image, let's fix that, sorry. So with that image, we can now set our image view with this image. So last thing to do is dish image view dot dish image view dot image. It's gonna be the image that we've just created, and we're done. So normally you would do this asynchronously in the background, but for our simplistic app, we just need to get the data in there. It might make the UI hang for a little bit, but at least we should be able to see our information down there. This function needs to be called every time we request for a cell. So let's put that in there. Let's put that in the header, and then go back to our recipe list. And then in this function, it's saying table solve for row at index path. So we'll need to configure our cell at this point. So let's pull out the recipe for this index path. So this will access the recipe for that row, and then we'll say cell set details with recipe, and then we'll say recipe. So now this is going to set our details on that cell. Okay, there's one more thing we need to do. So we need to actually call or actually reload the table. So we'll call a reload table on the table view, or reload data it's called. And also it looks like we haven't created these recipes before we started adding values to it. So let's create a new recipe. Oh, sorry, a new list. Okay, let's run that and see what we get. So it's loading now. Oh, and yes, those are recipes. So we can see the recipes from the internet. So it looks like it's taking a while for us to scroll here because it's kind of hanging. That is because every time a recipe comes into view, it tries to load the data from the internet every time. So we need to fix that. So let's go back to our application, and then in our recipe file, or in our recipe object, let's add the data itself. So when it's loaded, we don't need to load it every time. So it's going to be an ns data. Okay, so let's pull that across, do a synthesize on that as well. So what we need to do is create a function called load data. We can just basically copy this and set that to be our image data. So if we say that is the self.image data, and then for the URL we'll have so since we're loading that there, we just need to do a quick check. We'll make sure that the data is loaded before we try to request the data. So if we remove that and do something like this, if that, then we'll copy this and put it in here. So this is going to be image with data recipe.image data, and then our dish image view is going to be there. But if it's not there, we'll call recipe.loadData, and that has to be in the header file as well. So let's copy that. The same thing at the bottom there. Let's remove that. This can be done differently, either by making sure that the recipe loads its data itself, but for now let's leave it like this. So we're going to run that again, and hopefully we'll get a smooth scrolling recipe view. Yep, and that's it. So after it's loaded, our scrolling becomes smoother. So let's stop that. So then the next step is to actually add the information to our detail view as well. So if I go to my recipe detail here, what I need to do is connect the image view and the title to the implementation file. So let's do that now. We're looking for our recipe detail.h. So we've got a scroll view there. We just need to add these two. So let's call that dish image. And then let's call this dish title as well. So what we can do is create a recipe object on the detail view. So let's do that. And let's do a synthesize on that as well. Okay, so in our view did load, we can easily set the information that we need. So what we'll do here is set the dish image. And that'll be the recipe.image data. And then the next thing is the dish title. Oops. And we should be good to go. But before we do that, we also need to set this recipe variable in the list. So we'll pass that along as a list when we're actually clicking on the cell. So that will happen in the did select row at index path. So we can say our detail that recipe is so this will pull out the recipe from the list of recipes. So let's build that. So let's run that and see what we get. So those are our recipes, and if we click on that, we have our image and then the title there. For the free version of the Punchfork API, you don't get ingredients, so that's why we're not going to change these for now, but it's going to be similar. It's going to be the same idea with the way we actually got the title and the image. Let's try another one. Fish tacos. Got some fish tacos. Let's try the silky cauliflower soup. Oh no, that's gone. Grilled salmon. Nice. Fish tacos again. Tuna patties. Nice. So there we have it. We have our app finished. We've got the list designed. Nice design on it. We've got the detail view nicely styled as well. So now you're ready to go and design your app. So watch the next video and I'm going to give you some information on how to actually make this course very useful for you. Thanks for watching.